Imagine a country that if you literally picked it up and placed it in Europe, would stretch all the way from northern Norway right down to the Sahara Desert. Just a massive continent-spanning ribbon of land. Yet, on average, it's barely wider than a short road trip. Welcome to Chile, a nation defined by extreme, almost impossible geographical dimensions that truly shape everything about it.
Now, the central puzzle we're unraveling in today's explainer is this. How did this geographically isolated island of a country manage to become one of South America's most stable and prosperous nations? I mean, think about it. It's completely cut off by the world's driest desert to the north, towering mountains to the east, icy waters down south, and the vast Pacific to the west. How did it overcome those massive physical constraints to achieve such economic dominance?
The contrast in Chile's physical shape is just staggering. It extends over 4,300 kilometers north to south. To put that into perspective for you, that's roughly the driving distance from New York to Los Angeles. But its average width? A mere 175 kilometers. And at its absolute narrowest point, it shrinks down to just 64 kilometers wide. There is really no other nation on Earth shaped quite like this, and this incredible length means it hosts almost every single climate on the planet, right inside its borders.
Section 1. The Geography of Extremes.
To really grasp Chile's destiny, its history, its wealth, and even its politics, you have to first understand the actual ground it sits on. Up north, you've got the Atacama Desert. Blocked from moisture by the towering Andes and cooled by the Humboldt Current, it's one of the driest places on Earth. But despite how harsh it is, it's an absolute gold mine. Well, a copper mine, really. It is packed with mineral wealth, historically nitrates, and now copper, making it the country's economic engine. Right in the middle is the Central Valley. This is the fertile heartland with a beautiful Mediterranean-style climate. It houses the capital city, Santiago, supports massive agriculture and wine production, and it's where the vast majority of the population actually lives. Head further south into Patagonia, and you enter this breathtaking labyrinth of temperate rainforests, volcanoes, and icy fjords. Underpinning the whole shebang, the entire country sits squarely on the Pacific Ring of Fire. This means the terrain is highly seismic and volcanic, regularly experiencing some of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. It's an extreme environment that basically dictates exactly where people can live and how they survive.
Section 2. Conquest and Territorial Expansion. Because of this intense geography we just talked about, early populations and colonizers were funneled into very specific habitable zones. And naturally, this led to intense conflict over limited resources. Way before the Spanish arrived, the territory was inhabited by various indigenous groups, the largest and most prominent being the Mapuche. And wow, were they resilient. They fiercely resisted the expanding Inca Empire, completely stopping their southward advance. Later, when Spanish conquistadors arrived in the mid-16th century looking for gold and farmland, the Mapuche mounted a massive, highly organized resistance known as the Arauco War. The Spanish colonizers literally failed to conquer them. The Mapuche maintained a remarkable level of autonomy over their lands in the south for hundreds of years, signing treaties with the Spanish crown that recognized their independence. It's a legacy of resistance that absolutely continues to influence Chilean society today.
So, the modern borders of the country were shaped over centuries of conflict and state building. Back in 1541, Pedro de Valdivia founded Santiago, kicking off Spanish colonization in that Central Valley. Fast forward to 1818, and after a really grueling struggle led by figures like Bernardo O'Higgins, Chile is officially proclaimed an independent republic. As the 19th century rolled on, the nation began to dramatically expand its borders. A major turning point here was the War of the Pacific, which started in 1879. Chile defeated Peru and Bolivia, a victory largely fought over the control of valuable nitrate deposits used for fertilizer and explosives. Securing the mineral-rich Atacama in the north fundamentally defined Chile's economic future. Around the same time, in 1881, a boundary treaty with Argentina confirmed Chile's southern borders, locking down strategic control over the Strait of Magellan at the very tip of the continent.
Section 3. Dictatorship, Democracy, and Economics. Moving into the 20th century, the struggle over how to manage all that immense wealth ended up tearing the nation apart. The Cold War era brought deeply polarizing policies, perfectly encapsulated by two vastly different periods. In 1970, Salvador Allende, a democratic socialist, was elected president. His government rolled out programs including price controls, wage increases, and the nationalization of major industries, most notably those massive foreign-owned copper mines. But following soaring inflation, domestic destabilization, and financial pressure from the U.S., the economy entered a severe crisis.
This culminated in a military coup on September 11, 1973. General Augusto Pinochet assumed power, establishing a right-wing military junta. The Pinochet government completely reversed the previous path, instituting aggressive free market reforms, often called shock therapy. They privatized state enterprises, deregulated markets, and opened the country up to foreign investment, laying the foundation for the capitalist economic system that's still largely in place today. Now, it's absolutely crucial to soberly acknowledge the human cost here. The military dictatorship lasted for over 16 years and systematically suppressed political opposition. According to official Chilean government truth commissions, 40,018 is the officially recognized number of people who were killed, tortured, or imprisoned for political reasons during the Pinochet era. This legacy of state-sponsored violence left deep, lasting divisions within Chilean society. Divisions that continue to heavily influence its political discourse and legal system, even decades after the return to democracy in 1990. Section 4. The copper economy. The economic outcome of those 20th century free market reforms set up the modern financial landscape we see right now. Today, Chile is an absolute giant in the mining world. Copper alone makes up a staggering 60% of all Chilean exports. Let that sink in. The country produces about a third of the entire world's copper supply, fueled by those massive deposits up in the northern desert. Whether it's operated by private multinational companies or the enormous state-owned firm Codelco, extracting and exporting this metal is the primary engine for the nation's GDP and its role in global trade. Plus, the country holds immense reserves of lithium, which makes it a really critical player right now in the global transition to renewable energy and electric vehicles. All this concentrated mineral wealth has created a really distinct duality in Chile's development. Because of its massive exports and decades of stable macroeconomic policies, Chile is officially recognized by the World Bank as a high-income economy. It was actually the first South American nation to join the OECD, and they've successfully diversified beyond mining too. They export timber, world-class wine from the Central Valley, fresh fruit, and farmed salmon from those southern fjords. But there is a glaring paradox here. Despite significant macroeconomic successes, reduced poverty rates, and high productivity, the free market system has also yielded one of the highest rates of wealth inequality in all of Latin America. The structural gap between the upper classes and the working poor, especially when it comes to wages, public services, and pensions, is deeply, deeply entrenched. Section 5. People, Culture, and Identity. So, to understand who actually makes up the roughly 18.5 million people living in this highly stratified society, looking at religious affiliation is super insightful. Historically, the Catholic Church was a dominant cultural and political force, strongly influencing laws and social norms. And today, Catholics still make up 54% of the population. But what's truly striking is the rapid secularization of society over the past few decades. Nearly 26% of Chileans now identify with no religion at all. That is a massive demographic shift, and it strongly aligns with changing attitudes towards social issues. Add to that a growing Protestant minority, primarily evangelical, at 16.3%. What we're seeing is a snapshot of a modernizing, changing culture where traditional institutions hold a bit less sway over a highly urbanized population. Section 6. Democracy at a crossroads. All of that historical inequality and the rigid economic model ultimately collided, plunging the country into some serious modern political whiplash. Tension over living costs, stagnant pensions, and privatized public services totally boiled over in late 2019. This sparked massive, nationwide protests that literally paralyzed the capital. In a desperate search for systemic reform, the weary electorate shifted sharply left, electing 35-year-old progressive Gabriel Boric to the presidency in 2021. At the same time, the country began a historic process to rewrite its Pinochet-era constitution. But, as you might guess, finding consensus proved incredibly difficult. Voters overwhelmingly rejected a progressive, highly ambitious constitutional draft in 2022, deeming it just too radical. Then, a year later, they rejected a second conservative-leaning draft, finding it too traditional. Ultimately, exhausted by years of constitutional debate and seeking stability and security amid rising crime rates, the electorate swung hard back to the right, decisively electing conservative José Antonio Cast to the presidency in late 2025. So what does this all mean? Can Chile balance its entrenched free market legacy with the fierce, undeniable demand for social equality? This long, incredibly narrow strip of land has conquered its extreme geography to build an economic powerhouse and a resilient democratic system. But finding equilibrium within its own society, distributing its vast wealth, and addressing historical grievances remains its absolute greatest challenge. What do you think the future holds for Chile? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.